costs of being in the European Union are, first of all, we pay a lot of money across our borders. Sometimes it's quoted as if that's reduced by the fact that they spend money here. But when you look at what they spend here, it's usually on regional subsidies and is quite heavily wasted. And there's also the whole Thatcher rebate, which means in practice, when they give us back this money, it's then counted as deducted from our rebate. So the true costs are what we pay, and the bit that's rebated is often a waste. So the true costs are quite large of what we pay. The second thing that costs us is the trade arrangements. The European Union is often portrayed as a free trade arrangement inside Europe, because what people forget to say is that it's actually a customs union that raises tariffs, and well, not so much tariffs these days as anti-dumping duties and the threats of anti-dumping duties, which has the effect of raising prices inside Europe as if protection was taking place. So it's the equivalent of protection. And that costs us as a free trading nation. It diverts our output into inefficient industries, and it diverts our consumers from things that could be cheaper. And so that's really important. Europe is actually protectionist. And that links to the third major problem of Europe, which is that it's protectionist because it is using these instruments of Europe to protect labour in particular. There's huge amounts of intervention in the labour market to raise wages and living and working conditions of workers. That may sound very good, but what it does is actually create unemployment and reduce competitiveness of industries. And so added on to the protection of trade is the regulation of markets to tilt living standards of particular sitting workers who are in existing industries, improve their working conditions at the expense of unemployed workers and the industries themselves. What I'd say about this argument that we're restrained from being really stupid in economic policy, which is what it amounts to, by being inside the EU, is that we don't have to be stupid in economic policy. We don't have to have a political view that we should be protectionist, that we should be backing national champions. And indeed, I would say since the governments of Mrs. Thatcher in the 80s, we've moved away from that type of thinking pretty decisively. And Tony Blair's government after it never really went back to that idea of national champions and protectionism and so forth. So I think that if we were outside the EU, this notional gain that they would stop us being protectionist and interventionist is probably pretty minor. Well, adding together the trade costs, the regulation cost, and the direct contribution costs, it's looking about 10% of GDP or higher. It really depends how bad that regulative thrust could become relative to where it is today. And there's more and more of it, of course, particularly with the Eurozone crisis. It seems to be pushing the EU in a much more interventionist, protectionist direction. And one can have views about how bad that could get, which would push the costs much higher. And those costs are what we would call static costs. They're the costs of lost resources every year. There may be also dynamic costs, which we can't really measure, of the effects on growth over long periods of time of being in a essentially protectionist organization. So I think they are pretty considerable, the net costs of being in the EU. But I think we should go to free trade. I don't think we should be afraid of becoming a free trading nation. Trading as a solo, non-tariff levying country in the world market. And if you look at international trade theory and indeed international trade practice as carried out by countries like Hong Kong and Singapore, both of which are not accidentally ex-British colonies, you see this tremendous success story that can come from being a free trading nation. Resources go to their proper uses. Nobody has an interest in levying tariffs against Singapore or Hong Kong because it won't make any difference to the prices at which they sell their products, on world markets. Because if someone levies a tariff, or stops the product coming in from Singapore, they just simply divert it to someone else who wants a good product. And so this is the vision I'd hold out to British consumers and voters. Get a world like that of Singapore. These are small countries. We're a small country in the modern world. They don't worry about protection in the world market. They take world prices. They sell the stuff they're good at, and they buy the stuff that comes cheapest from the world market. And they have dynamic economies in which intervention is at a minimum.